The grand ballroom of Kensington Palace sparkled under crystal chandeliers as London's most influential figures gathered for what was supposed to be a routine charity gala. Princess Catherine stood near the entrance, her emerald green gown catching the warm light as she greeted guests with her characteristic grace. The evening had begun like countless others, with polite conversations about weather and weekend plans filling the elegant space. Prince William moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and sharing brief pleasantries with ministers, ambassadors, and business leaders. His navy suit was perfectly tailored, and his smile never wavered as he navigated from one conversation to another. Catherine watched him from across the room, noting how effortlessly he handled the social demands that came with their royal duties. The first sign that something was different came when William's personal secretary, James, approached him during a conversation with the French ambassador. Catherine noticed the urgency in James's posture as he whispered something into William's ear. She saw her husband's expression shift almost imperceptibly, his professional smile tightening around the edges. Sir Marcus Wellington, the evening's host and chairman of the Children's Education Trust, had just begun his welcoming speech when Catherine noticed William stepping away from his position near the front of the room. While the distinguished gentleman spoke about the charity's achievements and future goals, William moved quietly along the side wall, his movements deliberate but discreet. Catherine excused herself from her conversation with Lady Morrison about sustainable fashion initiatives and began making her way toward where she had last seen her husband. The guests remained focused on Sir Marcus's speech, their attention captured by stories of children whose lives had been transformed through educational programs in underserved communities. As she moved through the crowd, Catherine caught glimpses of William near the service corridor that led to the private areas of the palace. He was speaking intensely with James and another man she didn't immediately recognize. The stranger wore a simple black suit and carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to serious responsibilities. The applause that followed Sir Marcus's speech provided perfect cover for Catherine to reach the edge of the main ballroom. From there, she could see William more clearly. His usually composed demeanor showed cracks of genuine concern, something she rarely witnessed during public events. His hands moved as he spoke, a gesture she recognized from their private conversations when he was working through complex problems. James handed William what appeared to be a mobile phone, and she watched her husband's face grow more serious as he read something on the screen. The unidentified man pointed toward the exit, and William nodded gravely. Catherine felt a flutter of anxiety in her stomach, though she couldn't identify why. The evening's schedule called for dinner service to begin shortly, followed by a presentation from some of the scholarship recipients. Catherine knew that William was expected to deliver closing remarks about the royal family's continued support for educational initiatives. His sudden absence from the main floor seemed completely out of character. She approached one of the palace staff members, a young woman named Sarah who often assisted with event coordination. "Have you seen Prince William recently?" Catherine asked quietly, trying to keep her voice casual despite her growing concern. Sarah looked around the room before responding. "I believe His Royal Highness stepped out for an urgent phone call, Your Royal Highness. He mentioned he would return shortly." The explanation felt incomplete to Catherine. William received urgent calls regularly, but he typically handled them without leaving the main event unless something truly significant was happening. She thanked Sarah and continued moving toward the area where she had last seen her husband. The corridor beyond the ballroom led to several private offices and meeting rooms used by the royal staff. As Catherine approached, she could hear voices coming from behind a partially closed door. William's voice was among them, along with at least two others she didn't recognize. "The situation has escalated beyond our initial assessment," she heard someone saying. "We need to consider immediate measures." William's response was too quiet for her to understand completely, but she caught fragments. "Security protocols, and cannot wait until tomorrow. Catherine realized she was eavesdropping on what was clearly a serious conversation, yet her concern for William outweighed her usual respect for privacy. She had never seen him abandon a public event without explanation, and the urgency of the voices suggested something far more serious than a typical royal scheduling conflict. The sounds of the gala continued in the background, glasses clinking, conversations humming, and occasional laughter punctuating the elegant atmosphere. Yet Catherine found herself in a strange bubble of tension, aware that something significant was unfolding just meters away from where hundreds of guests continued their evening as if nothing had changed. She positioned herself where she could observe the corridor while still appearing to be part of the main event. From this vantage point, she could see both the ongoing gala and the doorway where William was presumably dealing with whatever crisis had emerged. The minutes stretched longer than they should have. Dinner service began, and guests moved toward their assigned tables with the gentle guidance of palace staff. Catherine realized that William's absence was becoming noticeable to others besides herself. She watched Sir Marcus glancing around the room, clearly looking for the prince who was supposed to be participating in the evening's formal proceedings. Lady Pemberton, a longtime supporter of the charity and someone who had known the royal family for decades, approached Catherine with a warm smile. "My dear, what a wonderful turnout tonight. The prince must be so pleased with the support for such an important cause." "Yes, indeed," Catherine replied, maintaining her composure while scanning the room once more. "The work they're doing with these educational programs is truly transformative. I was hoping to speak with William about the scholarship program in Wales," Lady Pemberton continued. "My foundation is interested in expanding our support. Is he available?" The question created an uncomfortable moment for Catherine. She couldn't explain William's absence without knowing what was happening herself, yet she needed to provide some response to this influential supporter. "I believe he's attending to some urgent business at the moment, but I'm certain he would be delighted to discuss the Wales program with you. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting next week." Lady Pemberton accepted this suggestion gracefully, but Catherine noticed other guests beginning to ask similar questions. The royal couple's presence was expected and required for events like this, and William's extended absence was creating ripples of curiosity throughout the gathering. James reappeared in the main ballroom, moving quickly but trying not to draw attention. Catherine watched him approach the event coordinator and engage in what appeared to be a tense, whispered conversation. The coordinator's expression grew concerned as James spoke, and Catherine saw him gesture toward the head table where William was supposed to be seated for dinner. The realization hit Catherine that this might not be a brief interruption. Whatever was happening required William's immediate and sustained attention, something serious enough to override his commitment to this important charity event. She felt a mixture of worry for her husband and concern about how to manage the social situation that was developing. As the first course was being served, Catherine made a decision. She needed to understand what was happening, both for her own peace of mind and to determine how to handle the increasingly awkward situation with their guests. She excused herself from her table, claiming she needed to check on some last-minute arrangements. The corridor was now empty, but she could still hear voices from behind the closed door. As she approached, the conversation became clearer, though she still couldn't understand the complete context of what was being discussed. "The timeline has moved up significantly," someone was saying. "We cannot maintain the current schedule given these new developments." William's voice was more audible now. "I understand the implications, but we need to consider all the variables before making any final decisions. The consequences of moving too quickly could be worse than the original problem." The gravity in his tone convinced Catherine that whatever was happening extended far beyond typical royal business. This was a conversation about something that demanded immediate, serious attention from someone in William's position. Catherine stood frozen in the corridor, her heart racing as she processed what she had overheard. The seriousness in William's voice told her this was no ordinary royal business. She knew she needed to make a choice: return to the gala and continue managing the social situation, or find a way to understand what crisis required her husband's immediate departure from their public commitments. Before she could decide, the door opened suddenly. James emerged first, followed by the man in the black suit, and finally William himself. All three men stopped when they saw Catherine standing in the corridor, their expressions revealing surprise mixed with concern. "Catherine," William said, his voice carrying a weight she rarely heard during public events. "I was going to find you in a moment." The man in the black suit glanced between the royal couple, clearly assessing whether his presence was still needed. James stepped forward slightly, his protective instincts as William's secretary evident in his posture. "What's happening, William?" Catherine asked directly, abandoning the formal pleasantries that typically govern their public interactions. "The guests are asking for you, and Sir Marcus is becoming concerned about the evening's schedule." William looked at the other two men, some kind of silent communication passing between them. The stranger nodded almost imperceptibly and moved toward the exit that led to the palace's private areas. James lingered, clearly waiting for instructions from William. "James, please return to the ballroom and inform Sir Marcus that I've been called away on urgent government business," William said. "Express my sincere apologies and assure him that our support for the charity remains unwavering. Arrange for a private meeting next week to discuss the Wales Scholarship Program that Lady Pemberton mentioned." Catherine noticed that William's instructions were specific and thoughtful, addressing concerns he couldn't have known about unless he had been monitoring the situation in the ballroom, despite his absence. This attention to detail, even while dealing with a crisis, reminded her why he was so effective in his royal role. After James departed, William turned to Catherine with an expression that mixed professional urgency with personal concern. "I need to leave the palace immediately," he said. "Something has happened that requires my presence at Clarence House and then possibly elsewhere. I cannot provide details right now, but I need you to handle the remainder of this evening." The request was not unusual in itself. Royal couples often covered for each other when unexpected situations arose. However, the tone and circumstances made this different from their typical arrangements. "How long will you be gone?" Catherine asked, trying to gauge the scope of whatever was developing. "I honestly don't know," William replied. "This could be a few hours or it could extend much longer. The situation is still developing, and there are too many variables to predict a timeline." Catherine felt a chill despite the warm temperature in the corridor. William's uncertainty was perhaps more concerning than the crisis itself. In their years of marriage, she had learned that he usually had clear assessments of time requirements, even for complex situations. "Is there anything I should know about managing questions from the media or other officials?" she asked, shifting into the professional mindset that royal life demanded. "The press office is being briefed separately," William said. "For tonight, simply explain that I was called away on urgent business. Do not provide any specifics about timing or the nature of the situation. If pressed, direct inquiries to the official communications team." The sound of laughter and conversation drifted down the corridor from the ballroom, creating a surreal contrast with the serious conversation taking place just meters away. Catherine realized that their guests were continuing their evening completely unaware that a significant crisis was unfolding in the private areas of the palace. "Catherine," William said, his voice softening slightly, "I know this puts you in a difficult position. The success of this evening was important to both of us, and these charity relationships matter for our long-term work." "Don't worry about that right now," Catherine replied firmly. "Focus on whatever needs your attention. I can handle the social obligations." William nodded gratefully, but Catherine could see the conflict in his expression. She knew he hated disappointing people, especially when it involved charitable work that aligned with their shared values about education and opportunity for disadvantaged children. "Before you leave," Catherine said, "is there anything you can tell me about the nature of this crisis? I don't need details, but some context would help me respond appropriately if questions arise." William hesitated, clearly weighing how much information to share. "It involves security considerations that have developed more rapidly than anticipated," he said finally. "There are no immediate threats to our safety, but the situation requires senior-level attention that cannot wait for normal business hours." The explanation provided some relief. At least she knew this wasn't a personal emergency involving family members or health issues. However, security considerations that demanded William's immediate departure from a public event suggested something quite serious was developing in the broader realm of royal and government business. "Should I expect updates throughout the evening, or will you be completely unavailable?" Catherine asked. "I'll try to send word when possible," William said, "but my communications may be limited depending on how this develops. If you need to reach me for any emergency, James has the appropriate contact information." Catherine realized they had been speaking in the corridor for several minutes, and their extended absence from the ballroom would soon become impossible to explain without creating more speculation among their guests. "You should go," she said, though part of her wanted to delay his departure until she had more information about what was happening. William moved toward her and spoke quietly. "Thank you for handling this, Catherine. I know it's not the evening we planned, and I'm sorry for putting you in this position." "We'll discuss it later," Catherine replied, understanding that their personal conversation about this situation would have to wait until the crisis passed and William could speak more freely. As William walked toward the private exit, Catherine watched him go with a mixture of admiration for his dedication to duty and concern about the unknown situation he was facing. She had seen him handle many challenging situations during their time together, but the urgency and gravity of this departure felt different from anything she had experienced. She took a moment to compose herself before returning to the ballroom. The transition from the serious private conversation to the elegant social atmosphere required a mental adjustment that had become second nature during her years as a working royal. But tonight, it felt more challenging than usual. When Catherine re-entered the main ballroom, she immediately noticed that the first course had been completed and guests were engaged in animated conversations while waiting for the next portion of the evening's program. Sir Marcus approached her almost immediately. "Princess Catherine, I hope everything is well," he said with concern evident in his voice. "James mentioned that Prince William was called away on urgent business." "Yes, unfortunately, something required his immediate attention," Catherine replied smoothly. "He asked me to convey his sincere apologies and to assure you that our support for the Children's Education Trust remains as strong as ever." Sir Marcus looked disappointed, but understanding. "Of course, duty calls at unexpected times. I hope it's nothing too serious." Catherine navigated this inquiry carefully. "I'm confident he would be here if circumstances permitted," she said, which was truthful without revealing any specifics about the nature of William's departure. The evening continued with Catherine stepping into William's role for the remaining scheduled activities. She delivered impromptu remarks about the importance of educational access, participated in conversations with major donors, and ensured that the charity's objectives remained the focus of attention, despite the unusual circumstances. However, as she moved through these responsibilities, Catherine found herself frequently distracted by thoughts about what William might be facing. The lack of specific information created space for her imagination to consider various scenarios, none of which provided much comfort. Lady Pemberton approached again during the dessert course. "I do hope Prince William's urgent business resolves quickly," she said, These unexpected situations can be quite stressful for families. The comment reminded Catherine that their guests, despite their understanding about royal duties, were also people who cared about William and her as individuals beyond their official roles. Managing their genuine concern while protecting information about the developing situation required constant attention to her responses. As the evening progressed toward its scheduled conclusion, Catherine realized that William's absence had actually created opportunities for her to develop stronger individual relationships with several of the charity's supporters. Without the natural tendency for guests to divide their attention between both members of the royal couple, she had been able to engage in longer, more detailed conversations about specific programs and initiatives. Nevertheless, the underlying tension about William's situation remained present throughout her interactions. Every time her phone vibrated with a message, she hoped for an update about his status or the nature of the crisis he was addressing. By 10 o'clock, the gala was winding down to its natural conclusion. Catherine had successfully managed the final presentations, including a moving speech from Maria Santos, a young woman who had received a scholarship through the charity's program and was now completing her medical degree. The evening's fundraising goals had been exceeded, and the guests departed with renewed enthusiasm for supporting educational initiatives. As Catherine bid farewell to the last departing guests, she felt exhausted from maintaining her composure while dealing with the underlying uncertainty about William's situation. Sir Marcus thanked her warmly for stepping into the additional responsibilities, though she could see his continued concern about whatever had required William's unexpected departure. "Please give Prince William our best wishes for resolving whatever required his attention tonight," Sir Marcus said as they concluded the evening. "And do let us know if there's anything our organization can do to support your work in the coming months." Catherine assured him that she would convey his message and that they looked forward to continuing their partnership with the Children's Education Trust. As the final guests left the palace, she realized she had no idea when William might return or whether she should expect any communication about his status. James approached as the cleanup began in the ballroom. "Your Royal Highness, I wanted to update you on the evening's aftermath," he said. "The press office has issued a brief statement about Prince William attending to urgent government business, and there have been no problematic inquiries from media outlets." "Thank you for managing that," Catherine replied. "Have you heard anything about when Prince William might return?" James hesitated before responding. "I've received word that the situation is progressing, but no specific timeline for his return." "The matter appears to be complex and may extend into tomorrow." This information confirmed Catherine's suspicion that whatever William was dealing with was more significant than a routine crisis. Royal business that extended overnight typically involved substantial issues with national or international implications. After ensuring that the palace staff had everything under control for the evening's conclusion, Catherine made her way to the private residential areas. The contrast between the public grandeur of the ballroom and the comfortable privacy of their personal quarters had never felt more pronounced. She changed from her formal gown into comfortable clothes and settled into William's study, hoping to hear from him soon. The room reflected his personality and interests. Books about history and environmental conservation, photographs from their travels and family moments, and the organized papers that represented his various charitable and official commitments. At nearly midnight, her phone finally rang. William's name appeared on the screen, and she answered immediately. "Catherine, I'm sorry for the complete lack of communication tonight," he said without preamble. "The situation has been more complex than we initially realized, and secure communication has been limited." "Are you safe?" Catherine asked, realizing this was her primary concern above all other considerations. "Yes, completely safe," William replied, and she could hear the relief in his voice that he could provide that assurance. "But I won't be returning to the palace tonight. The situation requires continued attention through at least tomorrow morning." Catherine felt a mixture of relief about his safety and continued concern about the nature of whatever was keeping him away. "Can you tell me anything more about what's happening?" "There was a significant security threat that developed rapidly this afternoon," William explained. "It's not directly related to our family, but it has implications for several upcoming events and requires coordination between multiple government agencies." This explanation provided more context than she had received earlier, though she understood that William was still limited in what he could share over the phone. "How did tonight go after I left?" William asked. "I've been worried about putting you in that position with such important guests." Catherine found herself smiling despite the stressful circumstances. Even while dealing with a security crisis, William was concerned about the charity event and her experience managing it alone. "Everything went very well," she said. "Sir Marcus was understanding about your departure. The fundraising exceeded expectations, and I had excellent conversations with several of the major supporters about expanding programs." "That's wonderful news," William said, and she could hear genuine relief in his voice. "I was particularly concerned about Lady Pemberton and the Wales scholarship discussion." "Actually handled," Catherine replied. "She's interested in increasing her foundation's support, and I arranged for you to meet with her next week to discuss specifics." They spoke for several more minutes about the evening's details and the logistics for the following day. William explained that he would likely be unavailable for most of the next day, but expected the situation to resolve by evening. After ending the call, Catherine felt significantly better about the overall situation. While she still didn't understand the complete scope of whatever William was dealing with, his ability to communicate and his confidence about the timeline provided reassurance that this was a manageable crisis rather than something with long-term implications. The next morning brought clarity about the situation that had developed so rapidly the previous evening. Catherine learned from the morning news that a credible terrorist threat had been identified against several high-profile events scheduled for the following week, including a state dinner that she and William were scheduled to host. The threat had been discovered through intelligence work that required immediate assessment and response from senior government officials, including members of the royal family who would be directly affected by the security implications. William's urgent departure from the charity gala had been necessary to participate in the coordinated response to this developing situation. By noon, Catherine received word that the threat had been neutralized through the collaborative efforts of multiple security agencies. The individuals involved had been apprehended, and the upcoming events would proceed as scheduled with enhanced security measures. William returned to the palace that afternoon, looking tired but relieved that the crisis had been resolved relatively quickly. As they debriefed about the previous 24 hours, Catherine gained a deeper appreciation for the complex security considerations that surrounded their public roles. "I want to thank you again for how you handled last night," William said as they sat together in their private sitting room. "The charity work is too important to let security situations derail our commitments to organizations like the Children's Education Trust." "It was actually quite rewarding to engage with the supporters in a different way," Catherine replied. "Though I certainly prefer when we can attend these events together." They spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing the implications of the security situation for their upcoming schedule and discussing how to strengthen their coordination for future unexpected situations. The experience had demonstrated both the unpredictable nature of their public roles and their ability to adapt effectively when circumstances required flexibility. Sir Marcus called that evening to check on William and to express his gratitude for how Catherine had handled the remainder of the gala. "Your wife's grace under pressure was remarkable," he told William. "She ensured that our cause remained the focus despite the unusual circumstances." The terrorist threat had been serious enough to warrant the immediate attention that had pulled William away from their public commitments, but the successful resolution confirmed that the security protocols surrounding the royal family were effective and responsive to developing situations. In the weeks that followed, Catherine and William implemented several changes to their emergency communication procedures to ensure better coordination during future crises. The experience had highlighted the importance of maintaining their charitable and public commitments while adapting to the security realities of their positions. The Children's Education Trust received increased support in the months following the gala, partly due to the strong relationships Catherine had developed during William's absence. Lady Pemberton's foundation indeed expanded its scholarship program, and several other attendees from that evening became ongoing supporters of the charity's work. Looking back on that unexpected evening, Catherine realized it had been a turning point in her confidence about handling significant public responsibilities independently. While she always preferred working alongside William, the experience proved that she could effectively represent their shared commitments, even under challenging and uncertain circumstances. The security threat that had seemed so serious during that long night ultimately became a footnote in their ongoing work, but the lessons learned about communication, adaptability, and mutual support during crises became valuable elements of their approach to royal duties in the years that followed.